Hi, Dr. Simonson and classmates. My name is Jason Eben. So we've come to the end of our class here, and it's time to do a little bit of reflection on our process that we've been going through, our design process. One that I have felt's been a challenge, but has been a really good challenge, and a number of reasons here to follow. So I'm just going to kind of I've used my final report as an outline here. I have some notes to go through and share and reflect on and talk about. So first of all, when I look at my report, I see first I have an executive summary, and that's really something that I've appreciated having to do a number of times with each of the assignments. My workplace that I'm in and my position I'm in now is asking me to do that more and more on these executive summaries as part of what I'm producing. So again, this was good practice for me in developing those. Secondly, I look at the fact that I built a team of people to do this assignment, or had to involve a team in that process. And again, as I look at my design team that I'm working with at my university, the dialogue, we've actually had quite a bit of dialogue that I've brought up with respect to this project in our workplace, just asking questions and getting their feedback on things, and as far as instructional strategies and things like that go. So that's been a really good experience for me in reflecting on this case study process. And really it's resulted in one of my colleagues and I will probably start a business together in instructional design, just getting off the ground. So again, that process was good. I look at my final report, and there's the philosophy in there, which we've had to do and modify a few times. But again, that philosophy, being a part of each assignment was important, or at least almost every assignment was important, because that's what always needs to be revisited in how we think about doing things and believe in specific ways and things should be done. That philosophy needs to be in front of us. So that was a good thing to reflect on and see multiple times throughout the process. Then I come to the design plan and the needs analysis. When I think about my own workplace and the needs analysis from Morrison and all the different analysis types that can be done, I reflect and think, well, most of this in my workplace, there isn't really that much time to do this realistically. But to have the framework and the mindset in the back of my mind when this part of the design process arises, I think is really important. But really, in the real world, how much time can really be spent here? That's pretty challenging, at least my experience so far in higher ed design. As I look at my notes here and from my report, I really spent a lot of time on assumptions. And both in the learner analysis and the contextual analysis, and just the time frame requires you to rely on those assumptions and what you're doing. You just don't have time to go out and do an intensive analysis of the context and an intensive analysis of the learners. In at least in my setting, we really have to rely on a lot of assumptions. So I really spent time in trying to identify those assumptions in the report, and then looking at the content that we were dealing with. Another analysis that to inform the task analysis, I used the topic analysis, which Morrison mentions is good for when you have a categorical structure of the content. So I did a topic analysis, I should say, for as the means for my task analysis, which resulted, that whole process resulted in the learning objectives, which The clearer the better. The reality for me is the SMEs I work with, the subject matter experts, are typically full-time professors in the higher education setting, and quite honestly, they don't really want to spend a whole lot of time in this area. They have in their mind what they, at least this is my experience, they have in their mind what they're going to do or want to do or need to do, and really don't want to spend a lot of time. So I really, in reflection, I think the instructional designer really needs to drive and really hit home on the objectives and really work with the SME to get those clear, measurable, because you get to that assessment piece, and that's where a lot of my SMEs that I work with fall down, because they haven't clearly spent the time on the objectives. So that's a really important part, that those objectives drive the assessment. And then I come to the instructional strategies in the report, and this is where Dr. Simonson mentioned maybe start your video, which I didn't start with, but got to the instructional strategies and start the video here, or getting to the point where Dr. Simonson mentioned, start your video with, quote, "The instruction created for use by officers at SWASTOC to independently and individually memorize assigned sections of the threat metrics will be." Well, here's where we're at with respect to my design. It'll be a multimedia interactive environment built on an e-learning platform, accessed primarily through mobile devices. But there will be a version also accessible via PCs as required by the RFP in working on SWASTOC equipment, etc. But in my discussions with my colleagues, we have an expert in mobile learning that I work directly with, and given the nature of the content and the requirements and the needs of this particular situation, with memorization being the goal and needing repetition and rehearsal, the ensigns need continual access to this lesson. So they need it to be with them all the time, like their print flashcards would have been. They're carrying them around. So really everything will be on a mobile platform, but available on PC too, but so that they can access it via tablet or via their smartphone carrying it around. We really felt that's important, that accessibility for the repetition, to be able to do the repetition and rehearsal, and touch the content, etc. Many times. Via that mobile device, then they'd be interacting with the content via text, via still photo, via audio, and via video. All of that would be available in that e-learning platform on the mobile device, and then also touch. So really, we're engaging 4 of the senses, other than smell. We're engaging 4 of the senses in that memorization process, which just adds to the retention. Now they wouldn't immediately jump into the lesson. There would be some pre-instructional activities for them to do. One would be a tutorial on just using the platform, using the mobile device and navigation. How would that work? They would learn that in the tutorial. The tapping, the menu structure, which would follow the categorical nature of the content. Given the need to scaffold the content, much of that of the content some of them, not much, but some of the content needs to happen soon and before other content is presented. For instance, acronyms, the abbreviations, and in the threat matrix information, those would be introduced prior to some of the major content that would need to be memorized. So there would be some scaffolding to that information, or is some scaffolding to that information. How will it be interactive? Well, for instance, instead of seeing just a set of text choices when they begin the lesson, what the ensigns will see is a globe, and they'll move that globe with their fingers, with typical mobile device gestures. They will move that globe and to a country that they want to learn about and learn the content of. For instance, the United States. So they would move that globe with their fingers, tap on the United States, and then they would go into the content for the United States with respect to the naval fleet, the different classes of aircraft and ships that the U.S. has, and navigate through that content using the mobile device. So that's an example of how it would be interactive rather than just clicking on a simple text link. An important part of the design is, of course, assessment, and also from our perspective, progress monitoring. So the ensign can know, how much of this threat matrix have I done or learned, etc. So two components with respect to assessment and progress monitoring. Always available on the screen to the ensign would be a take quiz button. So under the take, if they click on the take quiz, it would go into the assessment section of the lesson, and then they would have a myriad of selections of quizzes to take, identified by the type of content, whether it be by country or by ship class, by ship type designation category, by armament, whatever that they want to take the quiz on, then they can go ahead and take that quiz that's been built. Alongside that, there would be a progress monitoring button. So monitor progress, tap that button available on every screen, then they can go ahead and see how many of the sections of the lesson that they have actually in fact completed, and then also that they've taken quizzes on, and in fact which ones they've actually passed at a satisfactory level, which would be 90%. And then they can see where they need to also then revisit content. If they've taken a quiz and they haven't passed it, it will indicate that, and then they will need to revisit that content area, which will link directly right to it by just tapping on it. So that's kind of the overall kind of feel or nature of how the lesson would work and how they'd interact with the content. Moving on in my report, I look at the next things are really about timeline and budget. I've had to do a lot of this type of work, timelining and budget, in my current and past work. For timelines, for me right now in my workplace, really the marketplace is really driving that timeline. In our online development, we're being asked to develop programs on a really tight timeline in order to, quote, get them to market by a certain time frame. And of course, as an educator, I want to make sure that content and that instruction is quality instruction that's meeting the needs of what the program is asking. So it's a really tough balance between the timeline you're working on and trying to develop instructional content that meets the need and the problem that you're dealing with. In doing that, you really have to decide, at least again, my experience, you really have to decide where you're going to cut corners in the design process. Oftentimes it's in that needs analysis stage. You just don't have time to do that. So a certain amount of that's reflected in my report. And then getting down to the evaluation side, I really do like the AEIOU approach. It certainly gives a nice structure to evaluation. Again, I think Dr. Simonson highlighted in his introductory video the most important thing, and that's distinguishing between assessment of student achievement and evaluation of processes and people. So in my report, I'm talking about evaluation. So I was really more focused on in the nature of this project, the process, and the people that are involved. How would those be evaluated? And then finally, overall reflection of the case study project. I thought, initially Dr. Simonson even mentioned the vagueness of in a couple of his videos of this project, and while that can be really, really challenging, what I found it to be was really realistic of what I deal with in my workplace on a day-to-day basis, and that's, you don't have a prescripted expectation of what the result's going to be or what the desire is. Oftentimes you just have a supervisor come and tell you, here's a general idea of what we need, make it happen. So having the design process and following a structured, systematic design process, as much as realistically possible, really assists in that and in addressing some of that vagueness. But I like the vagueness in that, and the generalized outlines, in that it allows for creativity. It allows for you to struggle with the content. It allows you to struggle and challenge yourself in coming up with solutions to that. And in the end, that can be really rewarding. And so I've really found this to be a great process. I hope you did too. I really appreciate the guidance and just the process in general. So that's basically all I have. Hope you enjoyed this little synopsis, and thanks for watching.